This is just a very personal history, and there's so many of you here that I feel like I should acknowledge, but we're not going to. Guess what? We had some computer problems, so it's like and I see Chris Farnantano, and oh my gosh, you're in it, Chris, and. So let's get going. A very personal history. If you're here for history, no. This is a personal history of my last 50 years associated with this Martinez. So I'm gonna, just to get everybody in the historical mood. Here is the first. County hospital. They call it an infirmary. I want you to notice one thing at the top of the hill behind eucalyptus trees. I'll be coming back to those. I'll be coming back to the eucalyptus trees. The eucalyptus trees are still there. And so here we go. I've got a laser pointer. This is the first time I've used a laser pointer. By the way, Eric Bryan is my lifesaver. So here's the county hospital, but the hillsides changed a little bit, and we're at a different angle. But there are the eucalyptus trees. They're still there. We'll be coming back to those. An infirmary, so this is a close-up. You see just people lounging around, getting a sun bath. Now, I'm going to now go back 50 years in time to the 1830s and John Marsh. Now, he didn't live in Martinez, but he died here.
Yep.
He was murdered in Martinez. And for those of you who are from East County, the Marsh Creek Road, you know it all. Here's where he was murdered. They've got a marker up there. I don't know if your historical society put it up, but there it is out on Pacheco. So if you go from here out Pacheco and go a little bit past the 680, it's right where the red spot is. Okay, so he was not a laggard. He built this house near Brentwood, and how did he do it? He arrived here. He held himself out as a doctor, but he arrived here as an outlaw. He had to leave the country. He had to flee to Mexico. This was Mexico. And why did he have to flee to Mexico? He had been, he'd gone to Harvard, but there wasn't enough money to send him to medical school. So he was really interested, so he apprenticed himself to the Army and wound up in Minnesota in the Northwest Territory. And I just can't talk about what happened there, but he's an outlaw, and if you ask me after this session, I'll be glad to talk to any of you who want to hear the whole story. It's quite something. So he's an outlaw. He comes out here. He hangs up his shingle. He puts up his degree from Harvard. It's in Latin, and he tells everybody it says that he's a doctor. By the way, at that point when he arrives, there's only 100 people in Mexican California who can read. Okay, so and he hangs up his shingle, and then he gets enough money to buy a rancho, and he accumulates a lot of cattle. And he's got cattle on the hoof when the gold rush happens. So he takes his cattle on the hoof down to the flatboats and takes them up to the gold rush. And that money built this house. And this is, you start at Antioch and you go south. And guess what? It's going to be a state historic park. Now, They've been talking about it for decades. Maybe it'll be a step, but it's listed as gonna be. And there may be some gold buried out there, I'm just saying. If you got a metal detector and a free afternoon. Okay, so now to the first real doctor. This is John Strenzel. He came after the gold rush from around 1852 to Alhambra Valley. Interesting story. He was Polish. He had to flee Poland in the 1830s because of an invasion by Russians. Sound familiar? And he fled to Hungary. He went to medical school in Hungary, but he also studied horticulture, which is going to be a big part of his story. So he arrives here by way of Texas. He spends a few years there. He arrives here with his knowledge of horticulture in the rich Alhambra Valley. And he has a daughter, and pretty soon he's growing more produce than doctoring, but he does both. And his daughter helps him on the farm, and here she is taking the produce down to the ferry in Martinez. Now, anybody seen this picture before?
Yep. That's where it is.
You pass it in the underpass all the time. So this is my favorite trick with the residents. You've been going back and forth through years. You've seen this, right? And so that's one of the panels there. So the daughter gets married. Strenzel gives horticulture lectures in Oakland. He meets this guy, and his daughter's approaching 30, and this guy's approaching 40, and they've been haven't been romantically connected. But here's the happy couple. They're married, and they have a couple of kids, and I think this house is on Strenzel Lane, or was on Strenzel Lane, and one of those kids named Wanda. I don't know which one. So the guy lets his beard grow out a little bit in the 1870s. He's working. He puts in 10 solid years working the Strenzel orchards, and doing a really great job. And finally, he wants to get back to wandering around and taking long hikes, but he puts in his 10 years. And then Strenzel's so happy, Strenzel builds his dream house, which you know is the John Muir house. No, it's the John Strenzel house. And he builds it on somewhere in the early 1880s as he's retiring. And so his daughter and John Muir inherit it. And there they are with their daughters. One of them's Wanda, I don't know which one. But if you walk Mount Wanda, just south of 4, it's named after one of them. And then, of course, Muir goes on and becomes famous and gets to know presidents and takes them to where he likes to wander, off to Yosemite, right? This is the family gravesite. You go here and you go, oh, there's John Muir's grave, world famous guy. No, that's John Strenzel's grave. That's Big Daddy. This is over in the corner, John Muir and Louis. They're buried in the corner. A patient told me how to get here. If you take an innocent walk, don't drive, take an innocent walk out, and if you want to know how to get there, I'll tell you later. Okay, so there's another world famous man that's alive in Martinez in 1914. Anybody know where I'm going?
DiMaggio.
There you go, that guy. And this is the marker downtown near where he's buried. So somehow did I show the log cabin?
Yeah.
Okay, the marker's near the log cabin. You're going to help me. You're going to have to help me in this lecture. I don't know what I've shown. So this is Mark Vukalsik, and he was a resident in the middle 80s, and he took care of two patients Joe DiMaggio knew. The first one was Joe DiMaggio's cousin, and Mike. He took care of Mike for a long time. Mike sang his praises. One day, Mark was paged to go to the front office. Oh boy, now what? And there's Joe DiMaggio. And he hands him this ball, and he says, "Thank you for taking care of my cousin." Now that's the first of 4 sentences that Joe DiMaggio will say to Mark Vukalsik over the course of a total of 4 visits. So the second visit, Mark Vukalsik's taking care of another relative who coincidentally has Lou Gehrig's disease, which is what Lou Gehrig was Joe DiMaggio's teammate on the Yankees. So Mark and I are doing hospice in the 80s, and so Mark says, "I'll go out and make a home visit." And he goes and he visits this woman relative, and it's Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio's sitting vigil the first time. So on his second visit, the sentence that Joe DiMaggio, it's not really a sentence, it's a phrase. He said to Mark, "Cup of coffee?" And the third visit was the same. Cup of coffee. Okay, so that's 3. The fourth visit, somebody calls Mark and says, "Hey, I know you met Joe DiMaggio, but hurry on down to the ward. Joe DiMaggio's here." And so Mark hurries down from another part of the hospital. And as he gets near the door of the ward, there's a nurse there, and she says, "Oh, what are you doing on this ward?" She says, "Oh, Joe DiMaggio's in there." And the nurse says, "As if you know Joe DiMaggio." And they walk on the ward together just as Joe DiMaggio is coming out of the room, and he says, looks at Mark and says, "I remember you." So that's 4 times. Okay, also in 1914, the year John Muir dies of a broken heart because of Hetch-Hetchy, and the year Joe DiMaggio is born down on the waterfront, they build a hospital here in Martinez. And the Merrithew family, Merrithew's grandson's here. Yeah, there he is. So he's hold up your hand again. So hold up, there you go. So he sent me this colorized one from a different angle. So I really added that to my collection. Really happy about that. So this is his grandfather, Doc Merrithew. Now, also I learned yesterday from Eric that before when Merrithew was an intern in San Francisco, the earthquake hit. And Merrithew was on the health delivery team that went down to Golden Gate Park and helped treat casualties of the earthquake. He was in Lane Hospital and had graduated from medical school. The UCSF was on the hill but I'm not sure that's in the background. So also the family was kind enough to send me his history. I won't read this, but the highlights are after his internship, he came to Martinez as a private doctor. In 1911, he was made the county physician, and in 1914, he was the Martinez health officer. So I appreciate every time I give a talk, I always learn something new. So this is great. Eric and the grandson added to my knowledge of Matthew. But this is the guy I overlapped with, and a guy a lot of you know, quite a few old timers, Nancy, Kay, Irene, a lot of you. I'm leaving a lot of people out, I know, but it's worth a minute to talk about his timeline. He was born up in lumber country. His father was a lumberjack in Humboldt. The family moved down to Richmond so he could go to our good high school. He did, and he graduated, went to UC Berkeley, played football as a freshman, and when he graduated, for some reason he decided to go to Canada for medical school. And you know, the doctors that have worked at our establishment have a wanderlust, and it's going to come up over and over again. But this is kind of where it starts. He goes up to Canada. He goes and gets a residency at my alma mater, UCSF, in internal medicine, but he hates it. He hates it. He says it's trying too much to separate pepper from pigeon shit. He wanted to use his hands. He was a surgeon, so where are you going to use your hands? He went back and joined the Canadian Air Force and was sent to London during the Blitz. And he was an emergency doctor during the Blitz, if you can imagine, the Nazis bombing London. Can you imagine a civilized country bombing a city in another country? Unimaginable. But when he was done, 6 years, he was qualified in the Royal College of Surgeons. In 1947, he returns to his home county, and he takes over as the county medical director from Dr. Matthew, who'd been living and working and struggling as the lone doctor for over 30 years. Actually 40 when you count when he started in Martinez. And Degnan lived on the campus. There was not much, just remember in World War II, the county had grown tremendously from the shipyards and from the steel and Pittsburgh and everything. So he was overwhelmed. There was a lot of more people living in Contra Costa. So he started the residency, the general practice residency, because he said I needed slave labor. That's what I came to 20 years later in 1972. It was still a general practice residency. It became family practice 4 years later, and I got to be part of doing that switchover. So this is the kind of situation that Degnan faced in London. Just think of what Matthew faced in Tent City and Golden Gate Park. So similar disasters, doctors in early Contra Costa County, operating in tents. And then this is the second residency class, we think. We're not 100% sure. Let me make sure I get the laser pointer right. So this is Dr. Leon. He took a lot of these pictures, and you can hear from the murmuring here in the audience that he eventually comes back. But in 1954, this is his graduating class. And here he is with also somebody that the nurses know, Gladys Dosh. And so to train the slave laborers, Degnan needed assistants. And he called them registrars. It's a British term. But he called, and the term registrar continues. It's usually a generalist who has a special interest in something. Mine was dermatology. These guys have very interesting stories, and we got a couple of them back for a reunion that we had in 2010, and Kay Severson took a lot of photos, and I really appreciate that, Kay. So this is Brian Lee, and this is Jim Lynch, and they were both veterans. So Degnan relied a lot on the veterans and what they'd done during World War II. And that put a lot of spirit into the residency. These were guys that made do with what they had, just like Degnan had, and just like Merrithew had. The stories on the left, Brian Lee was flown in from Burma over the hump, Myanmar we say nowadays, and dropped by parachute in western China. He was a member of the forerunner of the CIA, and he helped the Chinese fight the Japanese from the west. Amazing story. Jim Lynch was in the Battle of the Bulge in Europe, and he got the Silver Star. Part of it was going on a zip line across a river with his commanding officer clutching the collar of his commanding officer with his teeth, and sometimes one hand, saving his commanding officer's life. Silver Star. During Rudy's years, Degnan started building the 3rd County Hospital, right? The 2nd County Hospital's on the hill back there. Degnan started building the 3rd County Hospital, which was the hospital I came to 20 years later, and a lot of us logged a few decades in. And some of us, like Irene Wakeland, worked in both the 2nd and the 3rd hospitals. Irene and I, in the 80s, started a hospice up on the back ward of the Brick Hospital, one of the few places in that hospital that were still being used to treat patients that had also been infectious disease at various times. Right, Irene? Have I got it all right? Okay. This is Degnan. He gets his 15-year achievement award by the Board of Supervisors. And by this time, Degnan has used his knowledge of Canada and Britain to know that there has to be a system of medical care. And he had been in London when they were debating the National Health Service. And he knew about Canada's approach as well, more universal access. And he had started three regional clinics in East, Central, and West County. And for me coming into this system, I came in from the Navajo Indian Reservation, which is a system and had universal access by treaty, and we had regional clinics. This was a dream come true because I'd internshiped in Highland Hospital in Alameda, and they had none of these things. By then, in the 60s, Degnan had started the Miller Centers. and named after his father, George Miller II. Miller II was a power in the state. He was Pat Brown's right-hand man, and George Degnan and George Miller bonded, and locally, among many things, they started the Miller Centers. George Miller II had a son, George Miller III, who was often in the room where it happened. He was also in the room where it happened with George W. Bush. He was part of Leave No Child Behind, and Bush had a nickname for him, Jorge Grande, because of his stature. I've been lucky enough to go sailing with Jorge Grande, thanks to the Teisel brothers who were sitting up front here. I could spend a lot of time reminiscing about knowing them, but I'm moving on. So we go across these bridges. One is named after George Miller II. One's named after George Miller III. Probably the only pair of bridges in the country named after father and son. I'm just saying. So what's the middle bridge right between those bridges? That's the railroad bridge, and you've passed by a mural of that. That's the 1930 as they're building the railroad bridge. And the railroad bridge kills one community. It kills Port Costa. Port Costa was where the railroad ended, and all the cargo was loaded onto ferry boats and taken across to Benicia and then on up to Sacramento. So if you've been to Port Costa, which our residents always go to, and which I did as a resident, you go to the warehouse, which is a really fun place. I'm sure a lot of people in this room have had fun in the warehouse. But it was no longer being used as a warehouse. It's being using more for entertainment. So George Miller was also a part of Obamacare. I'm going to trace a path from George Degnan to Obamacare real quick. Canada, British system, access, but there was one more thing that Degnan was interested in. Being from Richmond, he was interested in Kaiser Industries and what they'd done, and the health care that they provided to attract people to come up from the South. He had to have benefits, and so we're going to take care, give them good health care. And of all the things that he did, he said he was proudest of starting the concept of Kaiser. And so Degnan started the first federally qualified, state licensed, county-sponsored HMO in 1974. And Jim Teisel was a long-standing medical director there. I think he set the longevity record, right, Jim? Kaiser was so proud of him. Here he is with Garfield, Dr. Garfield. John Teisel worked at the first Kaiser hospital in Richmond. And so Kaiser always thought, if this works here, it might be good for the country. And as Jim knows all too well, that's what I think. So George Miller acknowledged George Degnan in the congressional record. There it is. But Obama acknowledges George Miller III. And where is this? This is in the lobby of the George and Cynthia Miller Clinic on the campus at Martinez. It's in a showcase. Do the residents ever stop and look at it? No. But if they did, they would see at the bottom, couldn't have done it without you, Obama. So that's the end of the pathway from Dayton to Obamacare. So I'm going to do a transition here and go back to the 60s and Kent Hobart. So this is the second wave of doctors that help train residents. Kent had graduated from the program, like Rudy Leon, and he stayed on to teach obstetrics and gynecology. When we had a graduation, every year we put on a spoof, right, and find compromising photographs of each other. So Hobie was a great spirit, but he's also an inspiration. Here he is, the year I graduated. That's me. That's Jay Crockett. That's my good friend Al Loosley. Who else should I acknowledge here? Kathy Carpino ran the program, the residency program at this point. So a lot of people, and there's Dayton himself. Usually quite a rollicking session. It's much different now. Some people would say that's a good thing. So this is Kent Hobart at our 2010 reunion. He's in a wheelchair. He was on vacation at Pajaro Dunes, woke up one morning, had a stroke in the spinal cord, and never took a step the rest of his life. I'm told that Dayton went to see him, and Dayton said, get up and get your ass back to work. So he did. He learned to do surgery strapped to a dolly. Amazing. He continued to practice, and there's many people in the room know he practiced right here in Martinez in private practice, in addition to doing his county work. This says it all. Rudy Leon, he went to Alaska when he graduated, but he returned in the 60s. When he went to Alaska, it wasn't a state. When he came back, it was. Here he is. He gets elected president of the medical staff a few years after coming back and gets an award. This is the reunion again, and he's with another staff person from the 1960s, Jay Aiken, who a lot of us will remember. And Jay lived in Martinez. And here he is with Louis Gertman, who was also a Dayton sidekick who took over in internal medicine. By the time I got here, he had health problems and was doing administration. And this is Kay Severson took this photo. We had a panel of the first two generations from the 50s and 60s that we could get and talk about the good old days. Now we get to the early 70s. Got to mention this guy. He did the residency a couple of years before I did, and he was 1 year ahead of me at UCSF. The important thing was his dedication to global health. So he started off when he was in med school by visiting Albert Schweitzer. I'll come back to that. Another arrival in the 70s was Mark Will, who became a mainstay in internal medicine, a strength through the years for our residency program. And that's me and Mark with a little less hair years later. Now back to Herb. So this is Herb's graduating class.
sorry for the quality, 1970. Albert Schweitzer and Herb inspired a lot of guys. This is Roger Barrow here, and he's visiting one of our residents, Kinnery Webb, who started a clinic in Indonesia. And there's a newborn baby there. That's appropriate. Roger continued to do obstetrics out of family practice clinic through 2 generations. So he was really a role model for our residents, and taught and precepted in the family practice clinic. He went to tsunami relief. John Stanger, John is in Bosnia, where he volunteered in 1974. John went on and became a residency director, and his family figures, you'll see in just a second, into the history. So Global Health Fellowship was inspired by Sigmund and people like Mark Stinson. Here he is in an African country monitoring fetal heart tones. And this is Neil J. Sakara, who took over, inspired by Herb Sigmund and Mark Stinson. And he started the Global Health Fellowship in 2010. It's become a thing, especially for residents with a special interest in serving abroad. They stay an extra year and study that. I redlined Sri Lanka because that's Neil's heritage from Sri Lanka. So he got an assistant, a co-director, who was also did the global health, and now he's helping organize it. Done many tours abroad. One of them was in Myanmar, and Aiko and I were fortunate enough to visit. Aiko is somewhere here. Hold up your hand, Aiko. I always say I can't do this without, there she is, hiding. I can't do this stuff without her support. So we were rewarded by visiting Matt in Myanmar, where he was serving the Rohingya in Doctors Without Borders. The Stanger family strikes 3 things. Besides John Stanger becoming residency director and being an inspiration for the global health, he also fathered a child who came to the residency. And there's about 6 or 7 examples of parent-child continuity in our residency. And also, the 3rd theme is residency romance, because she and Matt Fentress got married. And so there you go. Since we got organized in global health, it's not like they all go abroad. Some of them stay right here in the good old USA, where the Indian Health Service has contracts to take care of Native Americans. So we've got 15 in the Southwest right now. I mentioned quite a few and where they are in the Southwest. At the very bottom, I have Hannah Kang in red. You'll see why. They got together in a reunion a couple of months ago in Albuquerque. So this is maybe about half of them in Albuquerque with Neil. And my backyard neighbor, who also helped administer the program, Kevin Bergman, right across the fence, the back fence from us. Quite a coincidence. And Evan Pulvers, you saw her name. She's now on the Zuni reservation. And her hometown family doctor was Sam Richards, who graduated at the end of '79, and there's quite a story. When we went through the residency, we learned to put in burls. Degnan, when he was taking care of head injuries, every once in a while they were arterial. Most of the time they're venous and you've got time. But when they're arterial, you don't have time. And things move very fast and the pressure is building up in the brain. So he taught us the signs to look for and the signs where to relieve the pressure. And how do you do that? With a brace and a bit. And so we all had to at least get the motor memory for dealing with a brace and a bit. It happened to me one time. By then, fortunately, the OR had an electric drill, so we didn't need to use the brace and the bit. But the story that Evan tells is Sam Richards, the hometown doctor, was called to the ER, and there was a case moving quick. And it was a small town, and Sam got into the ambulance with the guy, followed. Oh boy, things were continuing to move quick. He knew he had to do something. They stopped at a hardware store, and he went in, and he purchased a brace and a bit. And he saved the patient and became a hometown hero. So this young girl at the time, Evan Pulvers, was so inspired that she came here, and then she's on to the Zuni Reservation. So the stories that project out from this small little town are amazing. This is underlined in red. This is the Indian Health Service, Tuba City, the furthest western. And this is Hannah King, one of our ex-residents with a friend. I sent her way visiting, and she's living in government housing, which Aiko and I recognize, right, Aiko? Yeah, government housing, you can tell. This is where Tuba City is. It's way, way west, and the most traditional part of the reservation, which we were initially dubious of, but it turned out to be a real blessing for a lot of reasons. And this is how you get there from Flagstaff. So the blessing was it was 75 miles from the Grand Canyon, 75 miles from Lake Powell, all along the Hopi mesas here. The Hopis are very different than the Navajo, and we got to sample both kinds of cultures, a nomadic culture and agricultural culture. So this is me. We had a regional clinic. The Indian Health Service believed in regional clinics, and this was a regional clinic. But now we had a hospital back then, very primitive hospital, much like the third county hospital that George Degnan built that was modeled after California high schools, right? You had to walk outside between the wards. But they've got a new hospital and new clinics now. That Hannah gets to work in. Alaska was the other place we sent residents, especially Bethel. And I have in red two people I'll talk a little bit more about. Lim was the class of 2020, and Bethel's on the map there. I just got an update from him. He says there's a thin sheet of ice on the river, which I can see from my little cabin. Okay, all right, that's adventuresome. And he volunteers at the 300-dog sled race. So, and he said he got Egerman's old Docker. He arrived just as Egerman was leaving. And Egerman just communicated with me and sent me this picture. And he and his wife Jane are with a Native American politician representative. And Egerman came down for our 2010 reunion and is in there somewhere. So back to Degnan. back to Dayton. Now we go to the 70s. Things get interesting. So I arrived in 72, and the next year Degnan got fired. And he had us form a union, and of course we all joined the doctors' union. And he said, "Now I want you to tell me to do what I want to do." And he'd look at his board of supervisors and say, "What can I do? These wild and crazy union members." And so Degnan got fired, but then Degnan had political allies. John will know, in West County, he was aligned with African American churches, African American political leaders. And in East County, it was Latino representatives and political movers and shakers. And so he said, they fired me, but they're holding a meeting down at the courthouse. I'm sorry, down in the administration building, wherever they meet. And it was packed. The supervisor changes were packed with Degnan advocates, and so the county backed down, retained his position, and then Jordan quit. The administrator had fired him. He said, "Okay, I'm out of here." I put this picture in to remind me that there were strikes. Union 1 had strikes, and there was a period where when they were picketing the hospital, the delivery semi-trucks refused to cross the picket lines. So Degnan went out, opened the cab, said, "Can you show me how to drive this thing?" And the guy got out, Degnan got in and drove across the picket lines, and the supplies were unloaded. So there were a lot of reasons for us to disturb the peace and quiet of you citizens of Martinez. Sorry for that. But we often would march down to the chambers. During all this, Degnan continued to teach. He was many things, but he was always a great teacher. And I think Kay will vouch for that, Nancy, Irene. He really could teach. And Rudy, when he came back, his real hobby was photography. So Rudy got these pictures, just like he took pictures in the 50s, he got some pictures in the 70s. So I really appreciate Rudy. Why did Degnan resign in 1978? I'm not going off the record, not doing that. But some historian someday will write a very interesting history. I will just mention a few things. He was a socialist, but he drove a Cadillac. He dabbled in real estate. A lot of stories about that. He was a sailor, and as George Miller III told me, on John's sailboat, he was the most buccaneer of all the sailors, and would cut people off, and he was ruthless. He was a contrarian, and so I think that spilled over into other parts of his life, but it certainly was on display. He was a speaker with Irish eloquence. And so we had a nurse who loved to ride on motorcycles, Ruth Peace. And she wasn't wearing a helmet, and she died in a motorcycle accident. So the elephant in the room at her funeral, God, what do you say? You know, this is a tragedy. And Degnan got out and just talk about, hey, she was a free spirit. She loved the feeling of the wind blowing in her hair. So Now, quickly change. This is Kate Bennett. She became a registrar and as a medical staff president, she defied President Reagan's Defense Department. Okay, that's that story coming up. I think it's one of our proudest moments. But first, she shattered the glass ceiling. You've seen a lot of my pictures I've shown so far, just a lot of male doctors, right? Well, Kate Bennett opened things up for sure in the 80s. So the shining moment of the 80s and the near-death moment. We were feted for refusing to go on with this war bid plan, but not just locally. In the New York Times we made, post-doctors rebuff Pentagon. And then Mark Will was on vacation and ran into a medical ethicist. And when he said he was from Contra Costa, the ethicist said, "You're from Contra Costa County? You guys are amazing." And he said, "You know about the whole cover of this ethics magazine that was devoted to Contra Costa?" And Mike said, "No." And so Mark got a copy, and I just took a few pages out of it. Should physicians prepare for war? The obligations to care for casualties. This is just a brief summary. We'll somehow post the video Ned's taking, so you can go through it more slowly. The physician is moral leader, the refusal of 60 physicians at Contra Costa County. The Gray Panthers, one of our proudest awards. And this is the doctor who led us, Catherine Smith, which so other old timers will remember, and Irene sure does. She served on the medical staff, and she got us all to do this, and hey, why don't you join the Physicians for Social Responsibility, everybody, because they're all in on this. So we did, and the organization got the Nobel Peace Prize. So we were all members, right? We feel like we got part of it. You all live in the community where this action was taken, so congratulations. You're all part of the Nobel Peace Prize. This just gives a little more detail on the rationale. All right, let's get to the near-death experience. This was basically a accounting error. That's all it was, but it's 6 million. And so quite a storm. Back in those days, 6 million was worth something. So it even brought the whole existence of the county-sponsored and subsidized hospital into question. We needed a new hospital. The hospital number 3 had leaky roofs, the earthquake code, and with the political storm, we lost the last vote that we needed. John will remember Tom Powers from Richmond. Bill Walker enters the fray, becomes the new medical director with the blessing of the county medical staff. Dayman opposed Bill Walker and wanted Paul Warwick, his man, to get it. But the Board of Supervisors, in their wisdom, met Bill Walker and let him lead us out of this morass. And he did. Now we get to the 90s. Dayman's still holding the grudge, and he has a point about the new county hospital. his idea is very idealistic. And he had made the pitch to us back in the 70s. Said, you guys go out and join the community hospitals. There are 3 of them. And Brookside was built with a community hospital money. So was Mount Diablo, and so was Las Medanas. So as district hospitals, they have an obligation to take care of indigent, to do charity care. So go take over those hospitals, and then so that the patients won't have to travel so far to Martinez. Good point. Except how do you do that? And there wasn't the political will locally among those 3 hospitals to do that. And Dagman couldn't do it, and he asked us to do it. We couldn't figure out how we were going to take over the medical staffs of 3 hospitals in addition to our own. We'd be spread over 4 hospitals. So at this point, Nancy Fodden, who spoke out against George at that time, and as I understand it, the reason that Merrithew Hospital received that name, it used to, when I arrived, it used to be Tri-CH, Contra Costa County Hospital. But the reason that it was changed to Merrithew was that Merrithew had delivered Nancy Fodden. And so some of you old timers will remember when she was your representative on the board of supervisors. So the battle became a battle royale, and George Dagman's son, Kevin, who was not a family practitioner, he was a plastic surgeon, and one of our graduates, Jeff Smith, who's lived in Martinez ever since he was a resident in the 80s. But then he turned around and he went to law school, and then he got into politics, all while still doing some clinical care. So he was on the board of supervisors, and it got nasty. It got nasty. And Dagman played the civil rights card. He went and got the NAACP involved and said, listen to this argument. Why should people have to travel so far? Well, it's a alluring argument if you can make it work, but he couldn't make it work. We couldn't make it work. Now let's see if the Board of Supervisors can make it work. And they couldn't. So they voted eventually for the new hospital, current number 4, but how that happened was interesting. Mark DeSaulnier, now our congressperson, he was against rebuilding the hospital to start with. He could see the point of distributing, and it was just Jeff Smith and Tom Torlakson who said, let's build a new hospital. Torlakson being from East County. He went on to become the state superintendent of public education. So it all came down to one dramatic afternoon where the question was forced. There had been a couple of years of delays in this political squabble. And DeSaulnier said, I have some requirements for me to refrain from voting to rebuild the county hospital. I have to have a clear commitment to accept detention and mental health patients. You have to give up some local control. If the county is going to be involved with your hospital, we've got to have seats on what they call the Joint Conference Committee, where you have the governance of different government bodies. And listen, if you mean it, give us a check for $325,000 today. Mike Wall was the CEO at Mount Diablo, kind of leading the opposition to the new hospital. And can you or can't you give us the money? And earlier in the day, Mike Wall said he was prepared to do exactly that, and actually waved around a manila envelope. And he said, okay, hand it over, let's go. And Mike Wall couldn't do it. And so DeSaulnier said, okay, I'm switching my vote. And we got a new county hospital. And that's a story, and it's complicated, and it involves moral questions, and I can understand it. But it came down to the practicality, and that was it. And those people that lived through it, including Bill Walker, deserve a lot of my credit. So by the way, Jeff Smith went on and became not medical director, he became the CEO of the whole county in Santa Clara just when the coronavirus hit. And you'll remember that Santa Clara was the very first government body that talked about social distancing. What's social distancing? What? I can't go to a party with more than 10 people? And it was a head scratcher at first, but she was ready. And if you read Michael Lewis's book, Premonition, you'll learn what a courageous person she was. And of course, she's been a target, a political target ever since. Us have some local warriors. This made the Los Angeles Times. Our local health officer, Chris Farnatano,
It's right here.
his home was picketed. His home was picketed. And this is Chris at a meeting. This is Chris as a resident. So what's wonderful is to watch these kids as residents go on and take on responsibility. Another ex-resident is Ori Svelli. He was the public health officer, and Chris is retired, looks awfully relaxed sitting over there, leaning against the wall. Hold up your hand, Chris, so everybody can see. And he was, his job was taken over by Ori Svelli, who had to answer questions as how's come white people are getting vaccinated more? And looking at the data, he says because they're older than other groups in this county. And so behind Chris is Rohan Ranahar Krishna, who is now in Sacramento involved in equity assurance. Other prominent people I just don't have time to mention with remarkable achievements. Just one, or a couple I'm going to mention. Naaman Shah, he went to India, and this is, he's coming back to talk to the global health fellows, and he's telling about his experience in India, and he gave the most sophisticated analysis of malaria and how it should be approached that I've ever heard. And it was university, med school caliber. World Health caliber, and he's gone on to do big things. But this was his experience volunteering in India, and he came in with this can-do mentality that George Dademan had to do and had to have when he went into London. This is another fellow, Doctors Without Borders. She went on. She was the one who made the mistake, and her class graduated in 2015, and we're sitting at lunch the week of her graduation. She makes the mistake of saying, well, I made the observation, boy, you must feel lucky. I spend 3 years in such a wonderful place like this. And she says, tell me more. And that's what really started my public project of putting the slides together. So I owe her a lot. And this is her and her class of 2015. So just to switch gears now, there's the book, The Rumors of Peace. And so this is really the history of Martinez, not so as much the history of the county. And it's a coming-of-age novel, a 10-year-old girl. And the girl on the cover certainly fits the image I have as the story unfolded. Now, what a time to come of age, 1941 to 1945. And she talks about experience I've had walking to the hospital. In her case, she's walking to the school in the Thule fog. And Ned wakes up in the morning with the Thule fog, as I'm sure a lot of you do. But for her, listening to the foghorns muffled the ghostly of the dead sailors. Who are the dead sailors? So the great thing about this novel is it takes on the issues of the day, the Port Chicago explosion that wound up killing 320 and injuring a lot more. 2/3 of the dead and injured were African Americans. So that led to the Port Chicago mutiny. And they were convicted, but then they were released when the war was over. And the whole process gave the questions of fairness a platform. And that led, if you will, to the desegregation of the armed forces by Truman soon thereafter. The other inspiring thing is her accounting as a schoolgirl of the founding of the United Nations. What? Somebody growing up in Martinez was part of the founding of the United Nations? And a Martinez school field trip, which I guess had to include the authoress, because it was all too real. I quote from her novel about the idealism coming out of that, and the miracles that can be accomplished. You can't change human nature, but draw out the very best of it. She quotes that line repeatedly. But she has some dark moments, obviously, but she was amazed to see that her teachers who went with her all stood and applauded at the United Nations. There wasn't any skeptic there at all. And she talks about leaving the City Hall, the green copper dome, people honking, applause, really a memorable moment for a 13-year-old girl. And here she is, Ella Leflin, now in her 90s, lives in the city, has had some minor success with other endeavors. Okay, so now we're back to the eucalyptus trees. And you're saying to yourself, thank God. God, the end is near. And so this is from the book. It's an evening. Suze, the girl in the novel, is talking about an experience she had with her mentor. A girl 8 years older than she was, who just saw in her potential and mentored her. And her mentor goes on to UC Berkeley and eventually Oxford. So smart local girl. One of their experiences, before she went off to UC Berkeley, her mentor took her up to that eucalyptus grove and enchanted into the mild night. O Artemis, come thou now to these eyes. Zeus, show thyself in thy glory. Achilles, I wait for thee. All above our hospital, this is going on. And the last thing, and this involves Irene Wakeland, I'm going to get to it. The book starts on the day of Pearl Harbor, and Suze is playing under a bridge, and all of a sudden, on the wooden bridge, there's thundering footsteps, somebody in a military uniform swinging a rifle, shouting invasion. He fires the rifle into the air. She's shocked, falls into the creek, and she later learns that it's the town alcoholic who had served in World War I, and when he heard about Pearl Harbor, got out his gun. Suze lives near Ariba. It's the only footbridge I can find in that area. I think one other candidate was mentioned to me this morning, so I'm willing to look at a possible bridge near the junior high school, Nancy McCormick. But here's the footbridge as it is today, and it certainly fits the description, a gorge. I went across it every day when I was a resident on my bike, and so did Irene. And so we revisited it this week, and this is how I got from our house that we were renting on Pine Street down to the health center. And this is Irene. What a coincidence. I'm there. Found the bridge, memories flowing back, and out comes Irene. And so there we are. This week I went back to the residency office, and this is just one wall. Mind you, since I've been here, there have been 50 graduating classes. 50. And so Bill Walker, who I've talked about before, had a few words to say this week about the residency. Bill's been very active. Jim Teisel pointed me in that direction, the work that Bill has been doing in Sacramento, but also in Washington, D.C. This is a letter that he got from Nancy Pelosi. This is what Bill had to say. I was talking about the infusion we get every June when 14 young medical school graduates come, and the energy that comes. And Bill refers to it as a gem, it's helped us in managed care, it's helped us through epidemics, it's helped us in hospital finances, at the residency and our strength in family practice. So this is Bill with a local citizen. This is Mary Goodman. So I've been putting off going into the museum for a long time. I strolled in one day, and here I am. So,
I said to you, do you ever do outreach? And you said, oh yeah, I do. And started it all.
Yeah. So my lucky day. All right. So I think you had something to say, didn't you, Mary?
Well, I have had 2 involvements with the county hospital. In the 60s, my brother was in a very serious accident summer evening, and there was he went to the county ER, and there was a doctor who was there seeing, he was on duty, and my mother swears up until she died, doctor saved my brother's life, and it was Ken Holbert. He was the doctor. And then fast forward, same patient, Peter, same hospital, very different circumstances. He had his first psychotic break when he was 17, and he was 5150 to the county hospital, went right to J ward, and there were 2 nurses there. One nurse was there in the evening, because it was at night was brought in, and she stayed with Peter, and when her shift was over, she stayed longer with them. That was Lorraine Cranes, and then Maxine Johnson was the head nurse who was there during the day. So that they talked to my mom, and my mom, of course, wanted to, what can I do? And they were the ones who said, get involved in mental health. And that's what she did.
Yeah, I remember Marie Goodman from the 70s, and I think she and George Degnan had a direct link.
Yes, they did, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
No, I just, I cannot tell you how much I got out of